Hello, Griffith Alumni. This is Alumni Extras. My name is Dr. Craig Cameron. I'm a Senior Lecturer in Corporations Law at Griffith University. And with me here in the Microsoft Teams arena to answer your additional questions from the Web3 for Business seminar is co-founder of Little Phil, Mr. Joshua Murchie. Hello, Josh.
Hi, Doctor. Good to be here again.
Let's answer this stream of questions on my dual monitor here. The first question comes from Nicholas Camoles. Thanks, Nicholas, for your question. He asks, thoughts on ENS, both as a human readable wallet address and as to identify or identity. Josh, can you tell us a little about what ENS is?
Yeah, so with crypto or Web3 wallets, they're usually a string of random characters. So that's, numbers, letters, and symbols, and it's all jumbled along on just one big long string of it. So what ENS basically comes in and does is says, okay, well, how do we make it easier for people to interact with this? So I could be connecting up, say, my wallet address with something that's human readable. So it could be Josh, Josh at ETH or Josh.eth. So whenever I want you to send me funds, or if I want you to send me an NFT, or if I need to verify my identity or something that's attached to my wallet address, I could just be passing someone, here's my, my address effectively. Okay. So what's on that? I think it's going to make it much easier for people to be working with this technology. So they're not going to be needing to copy and paste these large things. It'll make it much more user friendly.
There you go. User friendliness, Nicholas, is the key message there. Kiefer asked this question. What do you think about the applicability and value in owning your own data around social media applications on the Lightning Network, Web3? And this is a long question. With custodian node, very long question, such as in Xillion or Sphinx. And then he goes on to asks, could you use data for research when you own the data? So potentially much more ethical practices for many researchers, even outside conventional education institutions. So I think that might be two questions there, Josh. Very long questions, and I apologize. It's in an Excel spreadsheet and I had to really scan across there. So just thoughts on maybe applicability of owning your own data around social media first.
So applicability of owning your own data, I think we're kind of seeing that already with a big pushback against Facebook. So Meta, who are now, spending millions of dollars to try to change their public perception. A lot of that's really come from misuse and mistrust of the use of people's data. So as I mentioned in the presentation, with Web 2, it's always been around owning the data and then commercializing that data without giving you as a user any kind of say or control over that. So you have no idea where that data is being used. My thoughts are that, yes, I think it's a great thing. I think that this is the whole premise and concept behind Web3, as in, if I'm collecting data about you, Craig, you should probably know what data I have, and you should have control over that. And if I'm commercializing that data, then you should be rewarded in that, whether or not it's financially or whether or not it's just, usage credits or something like that. But, at least it puts the power back in your hands. It also, as I think I'll move into the second part of the question now, which was, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was around being able to use that data for other research purposes. So currently now, for anyone to get access to Facebook's data and what they hold on you can be quite difficult. I think in the EU, they've got some laws around that which can force them, so GDPR, which can kind of force them to hand over what data they own about you, but that's not everywhere, and it's not that easy to consume the data. So yes, I think that would be a good new avenue for different applicable kind of, whether it's research or business and so on. So the ownership of the data comes back to the person. I think that's a positive thing, and I think that it can open up a lot of doors for different benefits outside of just having one tech behemoth owning that data.
Brilliant. Thanks, Josh. And just a reminder to everyone listening, if there are any further questions that you have, or you just want to connect up with Josh, I was just the MC there at the alumni event. Josh is the legend in the Web3 space. Feel free to contact Josh. It's Joshua Murchie. Check out Joshua's LinkedIn page, and Josh has an email address. It's josh@littlefil.org. Josh, any other ways that the audience can contact you? Have I missed anything?
They're probably the best. I'm on pretty much every other platform though, so
Brilliant.
if one of them don't work, we can figure it out.
All right, let's keep going through these questions. So Cecile writes, and this is relevant to crypto donations. What is the security level or tracking system applied to the donation to ensure it goes to the right person or social organisation that supports the cause the person has donated for? How do we verify identity?
Yeah, so good question. That's probably one of the biggest challenges around everything, verifying that it's what is commonly referred to as the last mile. So how sure we can verify that the funds can get to a certain wallet address or a certain bank account, but post that, it's quite difficult to actually confirm exactly what it's being used for. For Little Phil, currently, what we use a number of different tactics around this. So one of them is around we KYC and AML. So we collect the identity, and we're only working with registered organizations at the moment. So there's a level of trust and certainty around there on who can be launching a fundraising campaign with us. So there's already that piece to it. We then have a system where any of these charities, when they're launching a campaign to raise funds for a cause, let's say it's one example would be that one of our charities raised money to build a small playground at a school. So we have a feedback loop where the charity actually provides, photos of that. So we can see, okay, they said they need this amount of money and this is the outcome. They provided the proof that the outcome has occurred. How exactly cent by cent that money is spent is kind of irrelevant to us. If our donors are happy with the price that the charity is saying it's going to cost to do this and they execute on it, that's the main thing, in our opinion. As we move deeper into Web3, we have more oversight around the use of funds, and DAOs, like we've touched on, but that's probably a longer conversation, can help facilitate that more transparent allocation and direction of release of capital and so on.
Great question. Thanks, Cecile. The next question, very general one on tokens, Josh. Can Josh explain a bit more about the purpose of tokens? I didn't quite understand how they work with the blockchain. So the relationship between tokens and the blockchain and how they're utilized, these tokens.
Yeah, good question. So a token effectively lives on a blockchain. So it is I guess you could refer to it as like a unit of account that sits on a blockchain. This is kind of a question where it can open up quite a technical answer, as in, say, Ethereum is a blockchain. That's probably the most well-known blockchain. When someone wants to launch, depending on the token, if they want to launch, say, a fungible token, they will launch a token contract, kind of like a smart contract, onto the blockchain, which will then say, okay, this is Craig coin. Okay, and you define how many Craig coins there are. You can define certain principles around whether or not they have minting. So kind of like the central bank, can they mint new coins or not? Is there a limited supply? Is it unlimited? Can they burn them? Can they pause these tokens? So ultimate control sits in whatever that contract is on the blockchain. So you're launching effectively your own mini central bank for your token on a blockchain, and you define those inputs and functionalities within it. So the relatedness there is that if it wasn't on a blockchain, you kind of lose the trust. So I guess I could launch a token on just a normal database server, but where's the trust? Why would anyone believe it? You know, I could come along and just delete it. Whereas blockchain, it's there forever. It's immutable. Anyone can check it out if they want. It's already got a connected, you know, system with all these different wallet addresses. So a wallet address is where you send and receive tokens, also a form of ID. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I guess there's a number of use cases for tokens, and it can do anything from facilitating transactions on the blockchain through to, as Josh, you mentioned, providing a permanent record of something. And because it's decentralized, the blockchain, there's that level of trust. It can't be unwound or be very difficult to do so.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anonymous. Nicholas, another question. Thoughts on the open metaverse, particularly standardization of file types that make NFTs interoperable across many platforms? So could you tell us a little bit about what the open metaverse is, Josh?
I'm not 100% sure on what they're referring to as open metaverse. Let's assume that they're talking about a metaverse that's built on a blockchain, as in it's not Meta or Facebook's metaverse. So it's not one central body that's controlling this metaverse. What that means is that you could be buying assets, as in, so digital land is a good example. There's a really good example of a DAO that's just done this in Sydney. So Alluvium just sold $72 million worth of digital land in their metaverse, in their game, basically. It's now owned by whoever's purchased it. So in their wallet address, they physically own this piece of digital metaverse land. So in an open metaverse, you can do things like this. The interoperability is another interesting question, which technically is not solved yet. So let's say you buy a car in one metaverse, that car is not going to work in a different metaverse. So you can't move it between metaverses. Sure, you can move the NFT that the car is attached to into a different wallet address. But if you tried to connect that wallet to a metaverse, that it's not, you know, doesn't recognize how to render the actual asset itself. So it's not been designed, the platform, to show you what that car is. It's not going to work. So interoperability with those kind of digital metaverse assets is definitely not there yet. And it's something that I think there'll be a lot of people working on.
Interesting stuff. That's news to me as well, Josh. Thank you. Next question. Are initial coin offerings still a thing? And what are the non-traditional alternatives to secure funding to develop a blockchain-based platform?
Are initial coin offerings still a thing? Yes, they still are a thing. They've kind of progressed into using what they call an initial DEX offering, or an initial decentralized exchange offering. That means that, so with an initial coin offering, an ICO would usually be a project would have a lot of their own work that they'd have to do. So they would have to develop their own, not only their white paper, their website, their KYC and AML compliance. So, you know, making sure that they're not falling afoul of AusTrack in Australia's example. Then they would have to facilitate the sale itself. So they'd need to have audited smart contracts that can be taking in funds and, you know, waiting for the sale to be finished before they release their own token. That in itself is a risk. Then all of the marketing that comes around that. So, you know, how are they going to get the word out? How are they going to encourage people to want to support and pre-purchase these tokens and it not be a security as well. So there's a lot that goes into that. Now, what is more common is parties that or businesses or companies that have already set up this kind of structure and they've already got a community of people that like to buy tokens early. Whether that, whatever reason that is, speculating, whatever it may be, but they've got all that infrastructure. They've got the legal team that's going to check across the project and give an opinion to say yay or nay, whether they think it's a security. If it's not a security, or that's the legal opinion, they'll then help them launch it, market it, and then hand over kind of thing. So it's evolving is the answer.
Excellent. And that answers part of the next question, which was what is the best way to secure ICO investors? And you did mention there the use of specialty groups that like to have investors purchase tokens at an early stage. The next part of that question was, what's the best way to make their investment worthwhile to everyone?
Worthwhile to everyone. I think really with those and being careful not to give investment advice here is with those kind of speculations, you would be wanting to pre-purchase tokens that you can use or that you think are going to be used more in the future. So some benefits around token projects are that one, you can be, instead of you spending money on marketing, so paying Facebook, Google, and so on to acquire users, you really could be giving out tokens, which are a credit on your system, usually, if they're a utility token. So you're kind of acquiring your users using tokens. So not a direct cost, but an opportunity cost of tokens. So the benefits there are obvious for you as a platform. You can receive funding, you can decrease your marketing costs, and so on. So it's a really good way to do that. And as a user, you've got the opportunity to kind of leverage your time, whether that's you're earning tokens because you're completing actions like sharing and kind of not paying Facebook for marketing. So it's more organic growth. Or you're wanting to come in early so that you get a discount because you know you're going to use the service or product. So yeah, imagine you getting half price phone credits or half price internet just because you come in early and you know you're going to use it. So there's kind of those scenarios there where it's win-win.
So fantastic non-financial advice there, Josh.
Thank you.
Next question from Vic. Another charity question. What is the first step for an existing charitable organisation to make accepting donations easier via Web3 blockchain? What are the advantages of this method as opposed to receiving fiat money?
Okay, so what are the steps? Sorry, the first part of the question was, what are the steps?
What's the first step? What's the first step for an existing charity to make that they need to make to accept donations via Web3 or blockchain? What would be your recommendation?
I would recommend that they get in touch with us to have a chat about it, so we can help facilitate that. What are the benefits? So the benefits are fairly obvious, that you are having a market that's growing significantly. So the transition of wealth into this Web3 market, if you look at the cryptocurrency market itself, that's exponentially grown over the last few years alone, and it's anticipated to continue to grow. When we think about, over the next 10, 20 years of inheritances coming down and younger people, starting to take over a lot more capital, they're the users of crypto at the moment. So what's likely going to happen? That it's probably just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. So if you're not looking at this area, then you're missing out on a massive market, as well as a lot of people in that area have made a lot of money. So a lot of them are kind of, if they're going to make a donation, it may be a significant donation. You know, your new kind of ways and streams would be the biggest opportunity. And then you've got everything else around like DeFi, so alternative ways that those funds could continue to grow. I think Charity Water is a good example where the founder of that from the US had said they received a bunch of Bitcoin a few years ago. They sold it because they didn't know what to do with it. And if they had kept it, it would have been multi-millions worth for them. So they now have a strategy of that they won't just sell any of their crypto donations straight away. They'll actually hold a percentage of it and, you know, continue with that on their balance sheet.
So Vic, get in contact with Little Phil's the message. I know that Little Phil does receive donations in crypto too. So they actually practice what they preach in terms of crypto philanthropy. The next question from Cecile, the question's in relation to the health sector. And the question is this: how would you see this blockchain applied to the health sector? Do you have any examples of companies in this space?
There's a lot of opportunity in the health sector. So straight off the top of my head, there's a few. There's one that we advise on that's in kind of Metaverse health. So that project is working around a few different areas, but let's give an example of data. So you've got the Australian government with MyGov Health, who have come out and tried to do their thing, which doesn't seem to be taking off too much. But imagine that if you yourself could control all of your own health records, and they're all connected to your Web3 wallet address, and you know, anytime you travel or you need insurance or whatever it may be, all you've got to do is just approve somebody to come in and, you know, get access to those records. So that's one area, but there's a lot of it comes down to medical records and access to data again. But you know, it could be remote healthcare in the metaverse, so being able to actually visit patients or make them feel more comfortable and say show them through a procedure that they're going to have, and maybe they live in rural Australia and they've got a VR headset or something, and you know, the doctor can come in and just from Sydney sit there on the other side, the patient's in some little mining town up north with a VR headset, and the doctor's explaining in the metaverse what's going to be happening before, so they don't need to travel to Sydney a week before to have a consult, whatever it is. And a lot of this stuff is kind of being powered by Web3 tech.
Thanks, Josh. Next question. This is around ICOs again, and its relationship with utility platform tokens. The question's this: does it make more sense to separate or merge ICO and utility/platform tokens?
I'm going to say that sounds like the ICO, they're referring to the ICO as a security, as a fundraising only mechanism. So in that case, sure, it would if you're launching a security token. In that case, you would then need to get, you know, the proper regulations and so on, requirements all sorted, and probably need an AFSL and all that in Australia to do that. That's why most tokens you'll see are utility tokens, because they have utility and they fall more on the side of not being a security than they are a security.
Thanks, Josh. Tia's question is this: how do you think Web3 will impact the future of impact investment?
I think that DAOs in particular will not only affect impact investment, but investment in everything. So if you think about how a traditional kind of investment firm would work, they usually take money from other people and then they make a decision on what they're going to invest in, and they take a clip along the way. A DAO can kind of replace that, and people can pool their funds together into a DAO, and then they can vote on what they want the DAO to invest in. So I think that it's going to disrupt not only impact investment, but all investment. And so on. For impact investment, it's probably a good thing. It'll be an easier way to gather large amounts of people with smaller amounts of funds that want to all invest in certain impact.
Yeah, that's one of the great advantages of the DAO, and Josh and I have made submissions to Treasury around a DAO, and we've written in the area of charity DAOs and its various applications. So Tia, if you're interested further, feel free to contact myself or Josh on LinkedIn in particular. You've got our details. And really the key message there is with the DAO, you can collapse management and membership. So it empowers those that provide the investment to make decisions about where their investment is going to go. So it's quite a powerful tool, and we're big supporters of it. Brenton asked this question, Josh. What are your thoughts on current security of the blockchain and the ease of stealing assets?
Depending on which blockchain. So there's a lot of blockchains. The reason why, say, Bitcoin gets a bad rap in the media usually, for, and Ethereum as well actually, for their use of energy, is the more energy, so the more mining computational units that they have, the more secure the blockchain is. So what the media and what a lot of people don't understand is that the more consumption and the more units that are working to secure this, the better. There are other just standard cybersecurity risks which any company has, as in if you code something, say, on a smart contract into the blockchain and you've left a vulnerability in there, then that's on you and you should have had it audited. And even then it's still not 100% safe, but you know, you're better off to do that than to be leaving any potential vulnerabilities in there. It's not really a blockchain security issue. It's more of a product or a, you know, technical coding piece that's on top of the blockchain. But otherwise, if you look at someone like Ethereum or Bitcoin, they're pretty battle tested. They've never been hacked. The attack vectors for them are, you know, 51% of the network attacks and so on, but the cost to do that would far exceed the benefit. So that old saying of too big to fail kind of starts to apply with them.
Thanks, Josh. The next question from Tim, and this is specific to Little Phil's relationship with Xillion, and it's the slide notes refer to Xillion as embedding impact into every DAO, and your example of Little Phil also speaks to social impact. Can you speak more to how this is being done? So I guess the relationship between Little Phil, Xillion, and the DAO.
Yeah, so we partner with multiple projects in the space. So one goal that we have from Little Phil perspective is to, how do we open up new streams of fundraising for charities that are not relying just on donations? So that comes in the form of being able to embed impact into products and services. In crypto land, it's kind of much easier to do that and start to enforce that with smart contracts. So instead of relying on, you know, many people may have seen, say, the 1% pledge, where a lot of companies sign up to this 1% pledge, blah, 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 but nobody really enforces it. You know, it's there and it's a nice to have, but who's out there actually checking that every one of these companies that are signed up is actually giving 1%? Doesn't happen.
So one of the I guess one of the benefits there, Josh, is that you can embed rules on the blockchain which can be covered in smart contracts, and clearly if you don't follow the rules, the transactions can't go ahead.
Yeah, it's just automatic. You're actually coding it in there, and as soon as a transaction takes place, boom, a percentage goes off. So these are the benefits of working with this kind of tech, and it's still very early. No one's really doing it. So it's still early, it's still experimental, but theoretically that is the areas that we're working on, is embedding impact into things like NFTs and DAOs, so percentages can come back.
Brilliant. Thanks, Josh. The next question, and you and I can both answer this one. Glad I can answer a question. Are donations via Little Phil or other social impact organisations tax deductible? So I'll start, and Josh, you can fill in the blanks because you deal with this on a daily basis. Just from a legal perspective, the first question you need to ask is whether the entity in which you're donating crypto to has DGR or deductible gift recipient status. So that's the first step. If the answer is yes to that question, the next step is to work out how much you're donating in crypto and how you received the crypto in the first place. Why do I say that? Well, because there are different tax rules depending upon how you received the crypto, how you use the crypto, and the amount of crypto you donate. And the complexity of the tax rules lies in the fact that crypto is still recognized as property. It's a common misconception out there that crypto is just like fiat money, according to the tax laws, and that all you need to do is convert the crypto into a fair market value of fiat, and that represents the donation that's tax deductible. That is not the case necessarily. So one thing that Josh and I are doing in particular is that we're lobbying government to simplify the tax rules, because it's not simply a matter of claiming an automatic fair market value fiat tax deduction for your crypto. Josh, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well put. I think you've covered almost everything that I would have covered anyway. So through us at Little Phil, any DGR registered charity in Australia, we're set up as a specific category. So Little Phil has its own charity arm, which can raise funds and issue tax deductible gift receipts on behalf of any other DGR. So if there's a charity that you don't see on the platform that is a DGR and you want to give to it and get a tax receipt, then message us and we'll help get them sorted out to be on the platform so that you can make a tax deductible gift donation.
Brilliant.
To them.
Yeah, and look, if you want further information on tax deductibility of crypto donations, the law that it stands now, I know that the ATO has recently released guidance as of last week, but I also did an article on LinkedIn which provides a table of the decisions that you need to make to determine whether your donation is tax deductible. And it's not just tax deductibility, but it's also capital gains tax implications of disposing of your crypto. So feel free to connect up with me on LinkedIn. And I know the alumni team are going to release that blog as part of their email that they push out to all alumni about this session. Okay, enough about tax deductibility. Let's get into the next question. A big criticism within the charitable sector is that 100% of donations does not go to the particular organisation. How does this differ via Web3 methods and Little Phil?
Yeah, so there is a common misconception. To answer that, I will start with a lot of charities will use a third party kind of marketing or fundraising company. So what usually happens is you'll see whatever that is, that third party company, and they'll take their cut. Then they'll pass it over, whatever's remaining. So in some instances, that's not a lot. These guys can take 60, 70, 80% or more. So then let's say that the charity gets their 20%. The charity then has their own overheads. So, they've got to keep the lights on. They've got, rent to pay and all of this. Then you've got the cause. So the cause then gets this little slither of whatever's left kind of thing. So the current system is fairly broken. There's no real transparency. A lot of platforms that say that they, 100% goes to charity, blah, 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 is not often true. You know, there are a lot of hidden fees, or if not, they've put it somewhere else in the accounts so that it looks like it. I think that donors should be aware and understanding that, yeah, that a charity is going to have costs. You will never get 100% to the direct cause or the direct beneficiary in most instances if you're working with a charity, because they've got their own costs. Hence why with Little Phil, our approach has been more around a goal, a campaign goal. And if you agree with the value of that, so, okay, it's going to cost $1,000 to go and build this little playground, then, okay, do I think that's fair? Yeah, sure. I'm happy to contribute to that. If they come in and said it's going to cost $1 million to build this little playground, I'm probably not going to donate to it. So Web3 has the ability to increase transparency around that. Web3 also has the ability to go direct to beneficiary. So you could cut out the charity altogether. The issues with that, though, would be that currently there's not really a trust system. You have to remember that there are a lot of scammers in the world. And how are you going to verify that that beneficiary genuinely is a beneficiary that needs the help and you're sending it to the right wallet address? So hence why our approach is to work with verified field partners that we know and we've verified their identities on the ground, who are then really the trust starts to come down to them as well. So are we trusting them? Are they onboarding beneficiaries that are legit? If not, we're starting to kind of downgrade their trust score, and ultimately they'll be removed from the platform. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah, so the opportunity to reduce costs, but also maximize impact by reducing leakage along the donation chain. And that's what Little Phil's looking to do, right, Josh? Building a blockchain that can develop trust and transparency and speed in transactions.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Next question, another charity-related question from Electra Frost. Hello, Electra. Question's this: how can a charity encourage donations in crypto and use the blockchain to be transparent and accountable with how the donated funds are applied?
I think that's a very similar question, I guess, to the one I just answered. So again, if you're working with a charity or you're part of a charity and you're interested in this space, then please do reach out. You know, we'd be happy to chat and see how we can assist you. So that's the first piece, as in how can they be looking to accept donations and so on. The second part is how can they be more transparent, and again, this really comes down to the tools that they have to be more transparent. So currently there aren't really any tools that exist for charities to easily update their donors. And that's part of what the Little Phil platform's been designed to do, is that a charity can come on and provide an update to anyone that's donated to that campaign in a few seconds. You know, they're busy people. We don't want to take much time out of their day. Currently, they would have to be doing, you know, emails, so EDMs and writing blogs and all this kind of stuff, and then pushing it out through different channels. We're moving away from that, and we're making it more simple for them to just provide updates and be more transparent to their donors.
Right. Thanks, Josh. A couple of questions here on blockchain mining. I think the reference is probably to Bitcoin mining in particular. The first one from Les: is the blockchain mining actually sustainable and scalable for the long term, or does it have a finite limit?
So to unpack that question, sustainable from an energy source point of view, let's say that there's limited energy in the world that is sustainable. So it would get to that certain stage, you would assume, but you know, it will also probably help propel more investment into sustainable energies. So I think that's a positive thing. Sustainability from, can it continue to grow? Can it still be profitable? Maybe is the other side that they're trying to get at there. Yes, it but you would have to, the condition there is that you would have to think about the advancements in technology. So with Bitcoin mining, for instance, it runs, there's a few inputs. So terahash, which is basically your computing power, the cost of your energy, and then the cost of, maintenance and upkeep and so on. So you want to have the most terahashes possible for the least cost of power and energy consumption per terahash, and the least cost of operational costs. So yes, it would remain sustainable and kind of profitable if you're reinvesting, or the whole Bitcoin network is designed so that if the price of Bitcoin goes lower, then it starts to make older units unsustainable. So they're not profitable anymore. It's costing them more in energy than they're earning. So through just pure economics, they should turn their machines off, which then reduces the number of terahashes on the blockchain or the Bitcoin network, which then adjusts the difficulty level of mining. So it will change how easy it is to mine or how difficult with less terahashes on there. So those older machines that are no longer profitable, then newer machines become more profitable because from a Bitcoin earning point of view. So they'll earn more Bitcoin than they would have if the old machines were still on. And then if the price comes back up and more miners come back in, same kind of thing. So difficulty levels adjust, I think it's every 10 days or so.
So great response. Very good question, very technical. If you are interested in what we describe as renewable Bitcoin mining, feel free to connect up with either Josh or myself for further details. Josh, are you still there? You've frozen up a little bit. You're back again.
Yep.
Yes, Josh has some further opinions, advice, can provide further advice around that issue. One question about Bitcoin mining from William: how do you actually get into Bitcoin mining, just in general?
Well, you would have to take those factors into consideration that I just mentioned. So, would you do it at your house on the Gold Coast or in Brisbane? Probably not, because the cost of your energy is probably going to be too high. It would be difficult for you to be profitable. And then you'd have to have a space in your house, and the machine can kind of be noisy and so on. For instance, we have a project that we're working on with some partners who are developing technology to make them more efficient. So the mining ASICs, they're called, application-specific integrated circuits. So they're designed, these computers basically are designed specifically just for Bitcoin mining. However, if you can make them more efficient, you can get more terahashes out of them. And efficient kind of comes down to cooling. So as long as you can keep them cool enough, and the cost to keep them cool enough is, acceptable, then that's where you've kind of got all these factors that make sense. So one, if you've got those factors that make sense, you can then purchase the ASICs yourself, and you could try and operate mine yourself. Or two, you could look at investing in companies that's their business. They're in the business of crypto mining. So you could be doing that and cloud mining and things like that.
Excellent. Thanks, Josh. Next question's around tax, just in general. What's your view on regulating cryptocurrency and the general tax implications around this? Are there groups that can help shape fair regulation around this?
My views are that I actually think that the ATO could do better than what they've done. The opportunity to attract capital, as in investment and new ventures and innovation through this, should outweigh that tax kind of early initial benefit that they're getting. And I'll explain that in a different scenario. So there are some jurisdictions around the world that have zero crypto tax. Why? Because they want to bring people that are quite involved with crypto into living in their regions, who are then going to be spending money in their regions, who are then going to be investing in their regions, and so on. The ATO, in my opinion, and their focus on, oh, let's just tax, you know, any trade that anyone makes in crypto, I think is wrong. I think that we're going to see a few people that will have got burnt with the recent Terra issue, and if they're still holding Terra now and they don't sell it for a loss before end of financial year, they're probably going to have a massive tax bill if they accidentally do sell it just after financial year, and so on. So I think there's issues like that where it's currently it's wrong and should be better.
Thanks, Josh. And I guess just as a side note, in Australia, we now have movement towards regulation of the blockchain ecosystem, including digital asset exchanges, potential regulation of a DAO as well. So if you want to learn more about where we're going in Australia around regulation, have a look at the Bragg report. And that's listed in some of Josh and I publications as well. Next question. Josh, what are your thoughts on using blockchain tech as an information storage catalog for something like sensitive medical information?
Yeah, I think we touched on that just before. There's some that are already doing data storage. So IPFS, what's it? Interplanetary File System. It's basically distributed storage, data storage. So instead of just Google or Amazon, AWS owning all your data in one data server, this is kind of broken up into small pieces, spread across a bunch of different areas, and then it all comes back together and is served to you. So the concept there is that it's there forever. You're not going to lose it. NFTs are supposed to be built on IPFS, so the data that's connected to an NFT should be on IPFS, like the image, the video, whatever it is, the media. There are people that are trying to work on HEPA compliant blockchains, which is kind of the health compliance around the handling of patient data and so on. So yeah, I think it's coming. It's just a matter of time.
Another question, Josh, on application of blockchain, this time to a manufacturer in the snack foods industry. So the question is, what could be some applications, and I'm putting you on the spot, of Web3 for a manufacturer in the snack foods industry?
Provenance is the obvious one. So you've already got a bunch of people working on provenance. It's a difficult thing to tackle, in my opinion. So I know of projects that are trying to do provenance of, you know, where was this meat from, where was this fish from, and so on, but it's really difficult to track that. So I know one large charity invested in something like that, and it was around the sustainability of fish and fish tracking, and you know, the solution was, let's put a tag on the fish, and now it's on a blockchain, so nothing bad can happen, which is kind of, in my opinion, BS. How do you do that? So yeah, provenance is one, but it's very difficult. No one's got it right. I've heard of things that are like invisible inks that they spray on it and stuff like that, but I don't think anyone's got it right yet. The other thing would be collectibles, depending on whether or not you're doing, you know, you own the brands, you could be doing collectible scan to receive an NFT or something. They're probably better at marketing than like those kind of areas I'd be focusing on. Provenance, I just think is quite difficult.
That's interesting, isn't it? So back in the old days when we were young, you get the little toys out of the snack food packets. Now it's no longer a physical toy. It could be an NFT.
Yep, 100%.
Fantastic.
Better for the environment.
Cecile asked this question. What's the security level or tracking system applied to a donation? to ensure that it goes to the right person or social organisation that supports the cause? And I think we've already covered this question, Josh, but if you could just summarise it. My apologies for asking the same question.
Yeah, so I think we've kind of summarised that question before. So with Little Phil, what we're doing is we work with registered partners. So we plan to currently move that out to, currently it's ACNC registered. So to be ACNC registered, you've got to jump through a lot of hoops. I know because I've had to do it. It's not the easiest process, and it's, if you go through that process, we're pretty confident that you're legit. So we're taking ID, we're KYC AMLing, we know who we're working with. It starts to come down to their brand and their reputation as well. So, but in the future, we want to be able to work closer with unregistered organizations and be using DAOs and those kind of mechanisms for fundraising and so on, which again will come down to how we rate people or organizations. So VFPs, verified field partners, as we mentioned before, with like a trust score. So a scoring mechanism around, are they providing updates, and so on.
Okay. Thanks, Josh. The next question from Alan: how are distributed blockchain-based system upgrades agreed and governed? Who decides on the changes, and how do they achieve the authority to enforce universal changes?
Really good question. It depends on the blockchain. So this is where you'll see miners and so on, and sometimes they'll have like a chain fork, what they call a fork. So maybe one group disagrees with the other group, and then you'll see like Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, or you'll see Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. So it's usually in kind of a DAO mechanism, as in that's what's common now is holders of the token will then vote, should we add this? So there's proposals that come into Ethereum all the time, which is, okay, here's a new kind of token standard that we could do, and here's why it's good, and X, Y, Z in the technicals. And that can be voted in or not. So yeah, hopefully that answers it, but the answer is it's not simple, and they're all different. There's no one standard way to do it, but think of it kind of like a DAO is probably the most common now.
Awesome. Josh, 8 questions to go. We're finally getting through all our questions. I understand the argument that Bitcoin is a store of value. However, this is different to the reality with the asset being heavily related to swings in the NASDAQ. How can you see Bitcoin moving away from this?
I disagree that it's completely correlated with the NASDAQ is the first piece. So I think right now there's a misunderstanding of it, just a fundamental misunderstanding, and maybe it gets tied to that a little bit, just purely because people don't fully understand it yet. But as people start to understand it more, that's going to change. I think when the dust settles from COVID, from the whole war in Russia, and from people understanding more about CBDCs, so central bank digital currencies and so on, that's really going to change the perception. As in, okay, if I agree or not with protesting about COVID, if I donated to truckers in Canada and they block my bank account, would I be happy with that? Probably not. If I'm some Russian oligarch and overnight I've gone from a billionaire to nothing, would I be happy with that? Probably not. So I think that when the dust settles and people start to understand this more, they're then going to say, oh, hang on, this looks like a pretty good hedge. And then same with printing and inflation. So now, even though the central banks are stopping, they're increasing rates and trying to tamper inflation, yada yada, the governments are still finding ways to pump cash in the economy. So like New South Wales right now is pushing out cash into energy supplements and blah, blah, blah. So they're all coming up with ways how they just keep throwing cash in the economy and devaluing the fiat currency. It's only a matter of time before everyone will kind of start to wake up to that and figure out that, oh, wait, now I understand the use case. So in my opinion, I disagree.
Thanks, Josh. And this leads your discussion of the Russia situation. Interesting because it leads to the next question. Question's this: after Russia invaded Ukraine, we've seen some Russians' crypto accounts blocked. How could authorities be able to do that, considering that it should be decentralized and encrypted?
The only way that I would see that happening, so I haven't looked into this, how they've done it, but the only way I could see that happening is, one, they're either using a centralized exchange, so they're storing it on a centralized exchange and not a real Web3 wallet, which the exchange themselves, so say like Coinbase or SwiftX or someone like that in Australia, is centralized, and the exchange themselves can block the wallet from doing anything because the wallet is held in custody by the exchange. You don't own that.
Yep. So the issue is that the exchanges themselves are regulated, and therefore they've had to make decisions around blocking crypto accounts. So it's the origin of the crypto being effectively held on a centralized exchange, which is the issue.
Yeah. So if you have, there's a saying, not your keys, not your crypto, which is, if you don't have your own hardware wallet or whatever, then effectively you're still under a centralized party. Okay.
Question from Angela: Hollochain. What is your take on this in relation to the blockchain?
I haven't looked too much into Hollochain, to be honest. It's an alternative solution using a different kind of technology that they say is more scalable. I know some people from that project, but it's nothing I've really looked into. I couldn't really comment.
So Angela, if you're interested in Hollochain in more detail, I'm sure Josh can connect you to the right Hollochain people. The next question from Brooke: how do you think Web3 will impact communications, particularly around B2C and or B2B?
How will Web3 change communications between B2B and B2C?
Or both, and or B2C and or B2B?
Not fully. I don't fully understand the context of the communications piece, but let's assume, say, it's marketing. So like we just said before, the B2C piece could be something like the snack food provider that's providing NFTs as a marketing mechanism. Or it could be that the B2C is a platform and they're providing you with reward credits or something. So it could replace something like frequent flyer miles. Like that's a pretty common use case. So rewards, and then let's say that you get the rewards, Craig, but you're not going to use them. So you give them to your brother. You can transfer them easily. You could sell them on an exchange, do whatever you want. Really, you still own them and you're not going to lose them. So it can transform in that respect. B2B communications. Yeah, I'm not really understanding the context of what types of communications between B2B to answer it.
Yeah, I think one important message here, Josh, is that for audience members that are interested in utilizing your services, and this is a shameless plug, but utilizing your services around strategy and consulting, that's one thing that you do. A business comes to you and says, look, this is our business, this is our structure. How can we use these emerging technologies to achieve our business strategy? And you can actually provide kind of that futurist strategist service as well, Josh.
Exactly.
Did I pitch you right there? Did I pitch you okay there?
Perfect. I couldn't have done it better myself.
Brilliant. Yep. So there you go. Shameless self-promotion, but it's an example based on a lot of these questions, the application of Web3 for my business. We can't kind of cover that in 1 minute, a 1 minute response, but Josh does provide an expanded service around that. Okay, next question. If people want to lend money to home loan applicants, do they still need to get financial services license to do that? I think there's a simple answer to that one. Josh?
The current answer is yes, they would still need. The futuristic answer is that DeFi and DAOs actually could replace that. So what's stopping, everybody coming together and saying, well, I got $500 spare, I'll throw it into this, and we're happy to fund mortgages for anybody that meets this criteria, and we'll earn the small percent, which is more than what the bank would give me. So why would I not do that? So the longer answer is the tech, I think, can replace a lot of that and cut out the middlemen around lending and debt. Regulations, I think, are unclear at the moment. I would assume you would still need some kind of license, but again, it's rapidly evolving, and
yeah, I think you need to be very careful is the answer. I think you would probably need an AFSL, and in any event with DeFi coming, there will be regulation which follows, and I can see regulation down the track, particularly in Australia. The next question. How do you use blockchains to overcome the MEV problem, where bigger miners or stakers decide the chronological order of transactions?
I'm not sure I understand what they're trying to get at there with the. So let's take, for instance, if it's a Bitcoin mining setup, usually the miners are part of what's called a pool. So the chance of you, Craig, with one mining unit ever being the lucky one that actually wins that Bitcoin is almost impossible. So what people do is they all come together and they join what's called as a pool or a mining pool. So now all of a sudden you're growing and you're part of this network with thousands or hundreds of thousands of miners. And if one of you win it, you all share a piece of it. So currently that's how it works. I don't fully, I'm not sure I understand what they're trying to get at there, whether it's the pool itself, but I think that's more of a, unless they're talking about a different blockchain, but Bitcoin, for instance, that's what really happens is you've got a pool, which is usually people that join a pool, and they'll join the pool for multiple reasons, whether that's better software, better rates, because you pay a small pool fee usually to join the pool and all this kind of stuff. So yeah.
Okay, thanks, Josh. 2 more questions to go. Artie, what's the criteria to be a verified field person? And I think that's related to the Little Phil application.
Yeah, so right now we'll still treat that as in we'll be doing KYC AML. So we want to verify who we're working with, at least initially. Then you can become a VFP. The way that you'll be able to recommend loans to the DAO will be that you're actually buying DAO tokens. So let's say that you buy 10 grand's worth of DAO tokens and you lock them up for 12 months. As a verified field partner, you then get access to all these benefits and so on of the Little Phil platform. So for your normal fundraising efforts, because you remember we're working with charities primarily. So it's access to all of that. And then you can also recommend up to 50% of whatever the total value of your DAO tokens that you purchased are. So in that case, you'd be able to recommend up to 5K worth of micro loans to your beneficiaries. And we start to build a trust score around that.
Thanks, Josh. Final question. How would you take an insurance company into the metaverse? Do you just buy space and set up shop? So I guess the application of insurance in the metaverse.
I think that you've got a bigger opportunity than just buying space and setting up shop. I think that you will have kind of like credit unions and so on, where you'll have DAOs that will be insurers themselves, and people that agree with the terms of insurance through that DAO will join, and they'll be paying their premiums into the DAO, and then there'll be some kind of voting mechanism around whether somebody that's claiming insurance is, eligible or not. So effectively, I think that the whole insurance industry is going to get a little bit of a shake-up in that industry, not just from setting up shop in the metaverse, but it's a good start. You can buy a small piece of land in the metaverse and set up shop. Put your brand in there. Metaverse, I think, will be more like a marketing channel. So a new way for you to find clients. Think of the white, yellow pages or whatever it used to be, and people would look in there for things. And then it's moved into shopping centers and moved into Google and whatever. This is more of just a place where you're going to have users in there doing their thing, looking around, and you'll have a brand presence for marketing, basically.
Brilliant. Well, that finally brings an end to our 65 questions on Web3 for business. Clearly, there's an appetite for this topic. So feel free to lobby your Griffith Alumni management and members for future sessions in Web3 in business, perhaps in specific industries or particular Web3 applications, because we could go on forever, Josh, on this topic. So that brings an end to the alumni Q&A. My name is Dr. Craig Cameron. Thank you, Mr. Joshua Murchie, co-founder of Little Phil, and feel free to contact us on LinkedIn and all of Joshua's socials. Just search for Joshua Murchie on LinkedIn, the socials, as well as you can email josh@littlephil.org. That's it. Thanks so much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you next time in the Metaverse. Bye for now.